X-Men returned to the animated screen in the form of X-Men 97, which is a continuation of the classic, and I mean classic, X-Men animated series that ran from Fox Kids from what, like 94 to 99 or something to that effect. I forget the exact dates, but all I know is I went from a young man to a older young man during the course of this teenage man during the course of that series. And it was, for me, this series was like must see, because that is when I was really heavy into comics. And I think in many respects, that time period for the X-Men in late 90s, early 2000s, actually really early 90s, early 2000s, it was like peak X-Men in storytelling and character design. Uh, it was something. It was something. And the X-Men animated series, more than any other adaptation we've seen, had or did an excellent job of retelling some of those classic stories, as well as retelling stories that were current of that day. I mean, we got a classic, probably the best retelling or adaptation of the Dark Phoenix saga ever outside of the comics. They also did The Phalanx Covenant. They also did Days of Future Past. There were just so many spot on adaptations, while changed for the series, that were just so well done. And they really, in my opinion, are still the series unto itself, but it's still some of the best representation of X-Men storytelling in a multimedia format till this day. And we're talking about 30 years later, almost, in many respects. Well, Marvel did something right, and they have decided to continue that series. So the new series, X-Men 97, picks up after the death of Charles Xavier in this world now, where we now have a sympathy for mutants due to his killing, his assassination by Gyrick. I have to say, these first two episodes were the storytelling. You forget how good that storytelling was back then, and also how the X-Men story in that world they live in is still so relevant to our current discourse. I mean, you talk about that hatred, that fear, that replacement. I mean, that's as much an allegory for racism of the 60s as with the creation of the X-Men by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, to the xenophobia of immigration today in our country, and individuals that are quote unquote the majority or in power have that fear of being replaced by others. It's such a timeless story as far as human interaction, and it translates very well, i.e., the X-Men story. And these first two episodes really, really do a good job of just telling a great story and really encapsulating all of those ideas. It is, I don't even want to say the story and the storytelling is mainstream. It is timeless storytelling. It's timeless themes that I think humanity has always faced in different ways. We've always had the same sort of conversations, just in different ways or about different subjects, but it's still the same conversations. Even now, with our current political cycle, those same conversations are happening in different formats depending on which ideologies you lean to. And the X-Men, and X-Men 97 specifically, especially with these first two episodes, lean very heavily into the idea of the ideology of what's right, the ideology of being better, the ideology of accepting everyone, regardless of what has happened. And even more so, it's so grown. It's so I wouldn't say like it's not adult language, but the themes, the topics, it's something that translates to the adult me maybe more than the child me really understood back then with the things because of how I am now, or at least what I've experienced and grown up in and matured as a man since my teenage years and middle school years before then. Well, I wasn't a teenager in middle school, but still. So it was such a good, not just good, it was an amazing 2 episode start to X-Men from the voice acting. One of the biggest things that I was worried about when I saw the previews was the animation style. I don't think anybody thought that it would look exactly like the series from the 90s, but the animation style, at least with some of the stills and whatnot, were very, for me, off-putting. But seeing it in action, there were some nuances where I'm like, okay, that's just kind of weird, but it was very fluid. There were just some. There was this one shot with Wolverine that was just so beautiful from a comic standpoint. But it was just written overall. It was written very well. It was they played around with some new things as far as how the team fights together, and you see that in the closing of the first episode. I was like that was some holy shit moments as far as I'm concerned because I was just like so surprised they did that. And then the second episode with Magneto, they did a classic retelling of the classic Trial of Magneto storyline, and the ending to that with no spoilers made me really mad. It made me really mad from a standpoint of what happened to a certain character, and yeah, I was mad. I was very mad. I feel like that happened in the comics back in the day to some degree, but I don't remember exactly. But if you watched it, you know what I'm talking about. But all in all, X-Men 97 was beautiful. It was an amazing reintroduction to these characters, to that universe, and more importantly, from a storytelling perspective, you don't need to have seen or even be aware of the original series to understand what's going on in this series. They do a very good job of giving information as to what's happened in the past without you having to know it. Whether it be the opening, oh, mind you, let me back up. Opening theme song is there. The opening, first of all, this is the one show where, it says skip for the intro. Nobody's skipping the intro because you are letting that music play and you are watching the intro every single time, every single episode. But I digress. They have very good sort of, not even montage, but scenes which shows you what happened in the past during conversation when characters are talking about it. So I think that you don't have, not I think you don't have to watch the original series to understand and appreciate this one. They give you enough information so you know what happened in the past without you having to go back and see it if you haven't done so. So I definitely highly recommend watching X-Men 97. I think so far this year for me, it is one of the best things I've watched between that and Halo Season 2. Best thing I've watched this year so far. So that's my take so far on episodes 1 and 2 of X-Men 97. Speaking of men.